There's an interesting process that occurs when people start to realize that rewards are all internal. And what they start to do is they start linking this duration path outcome thing to their internal rewards. And so to put this simply, one of the most powerful things that any person can do is to learn to control this idea of duration path and outcome and attach an internal sense of reward, just that you're doing well, to reward yourself mentally. Just say, I'm doing well, I'm actually on the right path. To do that inside of the demands that come from the external world. The more often that we can self-reward some aspect of the process, provided it's in the right direction of what we're trying to achieve, the more energy we're going to have for that, the more focus we're going to have for that. And remember, the reason I say energy, I don't throw that around loosely, is that limiting amount of noradrenaline is constantly being kept at bay. You're literally buffering the quit response. And so when people start realizing that if they set the goals inside of the larger goal and self-reward each one of those, they essentially have an infinite amount of energy to pursue those goals. They have an infinite amount of focus to pursue those goals. You see this most in the special operations community and people that are selected essentially for this process. So one of the things that's been intriguing to me, I have some friends from the SEAL teams, and I don't begin to really understand the real work that they do deployed because I've never done that kind of work, but I've always been intrigued by the selection process, the so-called BUDS process, right? Because carrying logs and getting in cold water and all that, that's not really how the work is. That's really not what the work is about. So the selection process is interesting because everyone shows up fit, motivated, and convinced that they're not going to quit. I mean, I think like there might be a couple people that just show up, but everybody is absolutely convinced. And then a very small subset of them make it through. And I'd be willing to bet that the ones that make it through, of course they're gritty and resilient, but they all are essentially, right? So that's necessary but not sufficient, obviously. Otherwise, everyone would make it through. The people that make it through somehow are able to tap into a process. Maybe it's a reward process, maybe it's through self-punishment, maybe it's through self-reward in the positive sense, but they're able to control something inside an environment that is not controlled by them, it's controlled by the instructors. And I've always been struck by the fact that in order to get through, you just have to not quit. Remember, people aren't being deselected. They're not saying, get out of here, you're not good enough, people are deciding that for themselves. Right. And so it's interesting because it brings about a real world experiment of people who are quitting, and I believe they're quitting because they can't manage these neurotransmitters. And when I say manage, I think that the people that get through, knowing some of these people quite well, had an internal process by which they could reward themselves for doing something that might have just looked trivial to everybody else, but it gave them more gas, more energy. Right? And what's interesting is the process, the kind of unconscious genius of the BUDS process is that they've picked two sensory events that are across the board challenging for everybody. One is cold water, which is great because most of the time it can't kill you, right? It's not like heat, which can kill you. It's cold water and sleep deprivation. And so the ability to do these, like what I'm calling DPOs, this duration path and outcome steps and procedures, is great on when you're rested. When you have well-fed, well-slept, you can do anything. You can be in any hard conversation. You can work through anything. So what they do is they start taking the autonomic nervous system, which is these deep reserves of the nervous system, that when our autonomic nervous system is off, it starts making us pay more attention to how we feel than the demands of the world around us. Remember that basic challenge in the nervous system. And so sleep deprivation is the best way that you can pull somebody down from their ability to analyze duration, path, and outcome and reward themselves. Sleep deprivation is the way in which you essentially pull apart the nervous system and the way that it wants to function, because it's very easy, again, rested, to do all this. But so what they do is they're sleep deprived people, they put them in cold water, they're trying to get them more in touch with the way that they feel inside than what they need to do in response to the external demands. Right. And everyone I know that's made it through that process did it slightly differently, but I'll tell you how they didn't do it. They didn't do it through sheer grit and determination. They did it through attaching a sense of meaning. They did it by micro slicing the day, or slicing the day into a series of meals that they just needed to get to, and then rewarding themselves for getting to that next milestone. So they don't know, I mean, most of them, probably had very low concept of dopamine and norepinephrine, but that's the process. That's also the process I think that allows someone to finish an ultra. I've never run an ultra, but I think that process of self-reward is grit and resilience in a kind of neurochemical definition.
Yeah.
And I think it's the thing that anybody can tap into. And I think it's so key, because I think people think that it's just so key that people understand, that these circuits are not unique to people who run ultras or people that make it through, stringent filter, special operations command. It's the same thing that
it is.
anyone